Go.
Perfect. Brilliant. So, hi everyone, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this evening's webinar, which is on UK marine non-native species. If it's your first time joining one of our webinars or at the Rockpool Project event, big welcome to you. Our mission at the Rockpool Project is to bring people closer to nature and to their local coastlines and inspire curiosity through citizen science. And a big part of how we do that is through our Big Rockpool Challenge, which has regular BioBlitz events in different locations all around the UK. And really excitingly, this week, our National BioBlitz is happening. It starts on the 23rd of May and runs through to the 31st of May. And this is a national citizen science campaign where folks all over the UK can get involved by visiting a rocky shore wherever you are and recording the species that you find. So for this year's National BioBlitz, we're particularly interested in recording non-native species so that we can build a clearer picture of the spread of non-native species around the UK coastline. So excited to get stuck into that tonight. Just to run through a quick bit of housekeeping before we start. This webinar is being recorded and we'll be sharing the recording afterwards on our YouTube channel. And there's also going to be an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. So you're welcome to put questions into the chat throughout. We'll pick them up in the last few minutes, or there'll be an opportunity to unmute and ask at that point as well if you prefer. If you have any technical issues, you're welcome to put a message in the chat, and I'll do my best to help you out remotely. I think that is everything to say just now. So I'm thrilled to hand you over to Ben, who's delivering today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening. It's a pleasure to give this webinar on UK non-native marine species. As Ellen mentioned, that's our focus for our National BioBlitz this year, which is starting on Saturday. So if you're able to get involved in that, that's brilliant. If you're able to spot any of the non-native species and record them, that's even better. And hopefully tonight's session will give you a bit of a background information for how to recognise them. I'm a marine biologist. I'm the CEO of the Rockpool Project, a co-founder of the Rockpool Project, which founded the project 8 years ago and is still going strong. I'm not a particular specialist on non-natives, but I'm quite familiar with quite a few of these species that we'll be talking about today. Some of the rarer ones, maybe a little bit less so, but this is the second year in a row we're focused on non-native species, and there's lots of resources out there to help everybody when it comes to discovering them and recording them. And so we'll be talking a bit about them as well. So on the next slide, I've got a reminder that the session is being recorded, but Ellen's already done that. So just as a reminder for you guys, if you don't want to be on camera, make sure you switch your video off. If you don't mind, then please do keep it on. So a quick breakdown of this evening's session. First of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Rockpool Project. Ellen's given a great introduction to what we're all about, but I'll go into just a little bit more detail on that. And then we'll go into the non-native species themselves, talking about generally about non-native species, what are they, and how do they come about, and then how can you help? How can you get involved? And then after that, we will look at species profiles of some of the most common non-native species that you might find across the UK and in your area. And we're going to look at them in quite a bit of detail in terms of how to identify them, but also in what parts of the country that each particular species might be found, and a little bit about their history as well. So the Rockpool Project, we are a not-for-profit organisation. We're a community interest company. We're actually in the process of transferring to become a charity as well. We've been running since 2018. And what we're all about is inspiring people to connect with their local coastline and their local marine wildlife, learning about marine wildlife, both on an individual level and collectively on a scientific level, and connecting people with each other. And that's been one of the biggest parts of the Rockpool project as it's grown. It's not just about connecting individuals with nature, it's about bringing us all together as communities and through our shared love of the wildlife that we're discovering. The Big Rockpool Challenge. So the Big Rockpool Challenge is our current flagship project. It's what we're basically basing our entire organisation around these days. What it is, in a nutshell, sometimes I describe it as park run for rockpooling. I don't know if any of you ever got involved with park run. It's a fantastic national organisation, and they run volunteer-led events, 5K fun runs local hubs, over thousands all around the country every single Saturday. So we have been inspired by that model, and we do it for rock pooling. Basically, we don't do it every week. We do it once a month. We have 10 hubs around the country now, and we're looking to grow that into the future. And we've been able to do this thanks to our funders, and that's the National Lottery Heritage Fund and the Scottish Power Foundation. And also we partner up with the Marine Biological Association, which many of you will have heard of, a fantastic marine research organisation, the oldest marine research organisation in the country. And they're based in Plymouth, and we work very, very closely with them in this project. As I mentioned, it's primarily based around monthly community events. If you're interested in getting involved in any of our community events, please do check out our website. You'll see where we have our hubs around the country. It's possible to run your own events as well, and there's information about that on the website too. On top of that, we have our annual Community BioBlitz Festival. That's going to be in August bank holiday weekend this year. And that's for that month, we don't have our community events, and we invite everybody down to Porthpeen in Cornwall, where we have a 24-hour BioBlitz challenge to find obviously rockpool species, but as well as rockpool species, we branch out in basically everything and see what we record in this fantastic site in Porthpeen. So there'll be a lot of information going out about this very soon after we've completed the National BioBlitz. So that's the other big part of the Big Rockpool Challenge is our National BioBlitz, which is the opportunity for people to get involved in their local coastlines, and that's what we're starting on Saturday. So these events, community events, are all about discovering wildlife. They're also a lot of fun. We call them BioBlitz battles because people team up or compete against each other. We give points for every single species that people find, depending on how common or rare it is. But the data is also very useful for conservation. And the main use that we're focused on at the start of the project is the reporting of non-native species. And so that's what we're talking about today and what we're focusing on the National BioBlitz this year. We partner with Natural England for this, and Natural England have provided us with a list of 45 target species to look out for when we're recording. When we're doing our monthly events, we're not just focused on those, we're focused on people can record absolutely any species, but if they do record one of these 45 target non-native species, then we report to Natural England on a monthly basis everything that was found off of that list, and that's now been expanded to other parts of the UK. We now report to Scotland and to Wales as well, and we're ready to report to Northern Ireland. We haven't actually got a hub in Northern Ireland at the moment, so we're hoping that in the National BioBlitz this year we'll have our first records in Northern Ireland, and we'll be able to report to the people who are responsible for monitoring non-native species there. This process is a really good addition to what was already in existence when it comes to non-native species recording. Sometimes it would take over a year or more for a reported sighting to actually work its way through the system and get to the relevant authorities. And so obviously we're getting the data is actually freely available as soon as you've uploaded it when we record it on iNaturalist during our events. But obviously, we update the Natural England and the other guys on a monthly basis so they can check it out and see what's actually there. And you can have a look at all of the non-native marine species on this list for England, at least. in this iNaturalist project, which we've created, not just the data that we've collated, but all of the iNaturalist data. If you go to the iNaturalist website and have a look for that project, you'll find it. So I've talked a lot about non-native species already, and I've explained what they are. So there's an important distinction to be made when we're talking about non-native species. Non-native is a broad term, which just means a species which is found outside of its native range. Also could also be called alien species. Another term, which you may well have heard of, is invasive species. And sometimes these terms are used interchangeably, but it's not generally considered that they mean exactly the same thing. So an invasive species is a species that is non-native, but it also has spread rapidly and causes active harm to the environment, the economy, or indeed to human health. There are a lot of examples around the world of invasive species, and many people are very familiar with them. So here in the UK, we've got a picture of the grey squirrel down there. That's a very well-known invasive species that's come across from North America. Which people are doing all sorts of things to try and control here in the UK, and they do have a negative impact on our native wildlife. So the red squirrels have been outcompeted by the great squirrels in many parts of the country, and that's one of the main reasons why people try to control their numbers and if they can get rid of them. So what about marine non-native species? So there's lots of these too. They're not generally less visible. Sorry, they generally are less visible, and that's just a feature of the marine environment. We humans don't typically live under the water, and so we don't tend to see the things that live under the water as easily as the things that we come across on a daily basis. So that's the same thing applies to non-native species, and they can go under the radar quite often, but until it's too late to do anything about them. On top of that, there are fewer natural boundaries. It's much more open environments, the marine environments, and so that's in itself facilitates the transport of species from their native range to non-native ranges a lot more easily. And another aspect of that open environment and that difficult environment for us to exist in is that they're much harder to eradicate. And so we've got in this slide a couple of examples of marine non-native species. Down the bottom left, there's a species called lionfish, which is one that I'm very familiar with. I did my PhD many years ago on Caribbean reef fish. And when I started in my PhD, these guys had just arrived in the Caribbean. Nowadays, they're absolutely everywhere throughout the Caribbean, and they're a major problem. And they have all sorts of different initiatives to try and eradicate them, including lionfish derbies, where they encourage local people to go spearfishing to try and catch them and then eat them. And I believe they're good eating. I've not eaten them myself. They must be quite a challenge to spearfish because you can see all those beautiful spines all over the fish. They are highly toxic, and so if you get stung by them, it can hurt a lot, apparently, more so than a weaver fish that we get here in the UK. And so you have to be careful when you're doing that kind of thing. And in the top right corner there, we've got shore crab, which is a native species to the UK, but it's also one of the top 100 invasive species in the world. It's invaded pretty much every part of the globe, marine coastlines. Well, maybe not the whole of the world's coastline, but it's invaded most of the world's continents: North America, South America, Africa, Asia, and Australasia. So yeah, it's got about, and we've got another webinar on that species next week. How do these non-natives get to where they're not meant to be? For marine non-natives, there are three really general pathways. Often it's not 100% known. Obviously, it happens when it often happens when there's nobody about, so you can't necessarily be sure how species get from their native range into their invasive range. But I mentioned for the lionfish, they are pretty sure that it was released from an aquarium in the Florida area. So that can happen. Shipping is a big one. Often in ballast water, ships will fill their ballasts in one part of the world and then travel to another and empty their ballast. Many marine species have a planktonic larval stage in the beginning of their life cycle. And so the as plankton, they'll be in the ballast water and then released elsewhere in the world, and then they can many won't settle, but some will, and then they can establish. And aquaculture is another big player when it comes to non-natives. And some of the examples we'll talk about here in the UK have been either deliberately brought here for aquaculture reasons, or they might have been transported on species that have been brought here for reasons. So these are the main three pathways. On top of that, climate change is a big factor. So it doesn't necessarily cause marine invasions by itself, but it does facilitate some species moving to new areas through some of these means that we've just been talking about, because it changes the environment to conditions that might suit some of these non-native species. So this is a little animation that I've put together to document the history of non-native species in marine species in the UK. This is all based on data from the National Biodiversity Network Atlas, which is the central repository for biodiversity data in the UK. And you can see that it goes back a long time. So in 1860, we had our first non-native species, this Bob Mason's hookweed, and that established itself in the south coast and the central, the southwest and central south coast. And then as the years went by, it was joined by other seaweed species, the oyster thief, slipper limpets, and Pacific oyster. These mollusks came along. And then up until sort of the 70s, we had some more species, but most of it tended to be on the south coast. And then once we moved beyond the 70s, we had new species, particularly wireweed, as you can see there, which was a really big player that we'll talk about it soon. And these species began to spread to other parts of the UK. And one thing that's quite interesting, I think, is that this Bob Mason's hookweed, which started the issue off all those years ago, over 125 years ago, which established on the south coast. It's actually quite rare we do find it down here in the southwest, but it's not a very common species. But it is, you can see up here in Scotland as we come towards the present day, you can see those purple points. There's quite a lot of it still up there, so it's still a prominent invasive species in the UK, but it's actually shifted its range within the UK since it was first established. And you can see there's a lot of records now. It's worth mentioning, whenever we're working with these kind of data sets, that the trends you see over time, they reflect both what's happening in the real world, and they're also a reflection of the fact that biological recording has also increased massively in that time as well. Maybe not just recording, but actually submitting records to electronic databases and that kind of thing. So there was a trend just for all species being recorded across that time, but some of these species within that trend, there is a real pattern of non-native species coming in over that time as well. And this is the plot for the top 10 species to look out for in the UK. So the most recorded species is what's called the New Zealand barnacle. It's also called Darwin's barnacle. Charles Darwin actually first described it. So that's the species that has the most records in the National Biodiversity Network Atlas. Then we have the slipper limpet, Japanese wireweed, and then finally Bob Mason's hookweed is still there at number 4. And next slide shows you just the top 5 species and how they've changed over time, just a graphical depiction of the map that we just saw. And you can see there that it is around about the 1980s to 1990s that really things really started to kick off. Some of the species have really started to increase again in the last sort of 10, 15 years or so. And some of them have dropped off. Definitely Bob Mason's hookweed has not been increasing as rapidly since 1990. And there is a drop off of the Darwin's barnacle or New Zealand barnacle as well, which I'm not too sure about. I think that could be a recording artifact. There might have been a big push to record them prior to that. Because I can tell you there's still an awful lot of them about, and if you wanted to record them, you wouldn't have any trouble at all. So you can do your bit to keep help people on top on what these non-native species are doing, and no better time to do it than with the National BioBlitz. So hopefully many of you are interested in joining us, and that's why you've joined us for this evening. So if you've not signed up yet, this is the page on our website to go to, www.therockwallproject.co.uk, National BioBlitz. We will be looking to see what data we're collecting across the UK, but we'll also be looking in particular regions. And every single species that you record, we'll be giving you a point for, depending on how common or rare it is. The scores go from 1 to 100, with 100 being the score for the rarest species, and 1 being the score for the most common species. So no matter where you are in the country, you've got a chance to not just compete, but we actually have prizes available, and fantastic prizes, I would like to say as well. So these T-shirts were designed by one of our great volunteers who's based up in our Bangor hub in North Wales. And we have a national hoodie available to the recorder who comes at the top of the National League. And then on a regional level, there are T-shirts available. And each of these is unique. So we have you'll have your regional winner name written on your T-shirt, or national winner written on the hoodie as well. So, and there'll be one of a kind. So nobody else in the world will have that, and you would have well and truly earned it. So good luck. I've got my eye on getting the Southwest one myself, but I don't know if I fancy my chances, to be honest. So I should mention that for the National BioBlitz, because we want people to focus on non-native species, that all of the non-native species are worth double points as well. So I say the score goes from 1 to 100. It can go higher than that for some of the rarer non-native species. So if you're lucky enough to find them. So it's good to get on top of what species to actually look for and how to identify them. So I'll be sharing this this link. It's not an easy link to write down. I don't know if maybe Ellen, you can actually share it in the chat somehow. Might be difficult for you to get hold of. You okay to do that?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much. It's also on our National BioBlitz webpage. So this is it's absolutely brilliant. I've got it right here, actually, the hard copy guide to UK non-native species, produced by the Marine Biological Association. It has a page for each one of the species and information about how to identify it and how to tell it apart from some other species that might be native species that you could possibly confuse them with. But it's available as a PDF, so you don't have to get hold of the hard copy, and it's available via that link. It's put together by John Bishop and Christine Wood, who are based at the Marine Biological Association, and they are, I would say, the UK's top experts when it comes to non-native species. So it's the best information you can get on that. When it comes to getting more detailed information about the history of these species and possible ways that they got here and the impacts they might be having, this is a fantastic website that I can recommend. It's the non-native species secretariat, and all of the species that we are talking about today have got a page on there with lots and lots of interesting information. So it can be quite interesting to find out a little bit more about the species rather than just purely how to identify it. All right, so let's start working through the species. Give me a second. So first of all, we've got the most recorded species, and that is the New Zealand barnacle. Now, I should mention at this stage that all of the common names that I'm using in this presentation are the same common names that are used for these species on iNaturalist. And the reason being is that we're asking you guys to use iNaturalist to record, to make your records. And so I wanted this presentation to match up with what you'll see on iNaturalist. They are not always these common names that people typically use in this country. They don't always match up with the common names that people have used, that John and Chris have used in this guide. So sorry about that, but that's just the way it is, and I had to choose one way or the other, and I think this is probably the best way to do it. So if you're looking for something in iNaturalist, it will match up. But it's also called the Darwin's barnacle. Called Darwin's barnacle in that guide, I don't know. But yeah, this issue comes up a couple of times. We'll mention it later. The only surefire way to know that you're talking about the correct species is to use the Latin name. The Latin name for this species is Ostrominius modestus. This is also changed in recent years, so be careful with that. But that's the correct Latin name. Now, it's a small white barnacle, and there'll be many of you, I believe, who may never have looked closely at a barnacle. Well, now here is the opportunity to sort that out. They are quite interesting to check out. They are crustaceans, quite different from your typical crustaceans like crabs and lobsters and that kind of thing. And if you look at them, you can tell them apart from other barnacles. You might just think they all look the same. One of the main things to check out are the four outer plate shells. So most of the similar native barnacles will have 6 outer plate shells. And hopefully, if you can see my cursor there, these are the outer plate shells that I'm talking about here. It'll only have 4. Another thing to mention, maybe I've got written there that it's a small white barnacle. I always think it looks like it's got a bit of an ivory color, whereas the native barnacles, when they're young and fresh, are more of a sort of pure white. Has a diamond-shaped opening. So that's the central bit of the barnacle here. That doesn't completely tell you what it is. There is one other species, at least, that has a diamond-shaped opening, and there it is there. This is the native species that you're probably most likely to mix it up with, which is the northern acorn barnacle. There's not a great picture to see that it's got 6 plates here, but one way of telling, you can see the difference maybe in the color there, but you can also see that there's a bit of a difference in the shape of the plate. So we've got a big plate at the back here that people often talk about them having a fat bottom, because this is the backside of the barnacle, and this plate is actually much wider than the plate on the front side, which sort of starts there and ends there. So that's quite different to the New Zealand barnacle, which has similar sort of size plates all the way around it. It's native, as you might have guessed, to Australasia, and also in Australia, it's found in New South Wales and in Tasmania and Victoria, but it's also very common in New Zealand. That's its native range. I find that it's often found in, like, if I find a bit of a seawall that's been dislodged and it's in the rock pools or something like that, which is not supposed to be there, and it's got barnacles on there, it's more likely to be a New Zealand barnacle than something that more sort of natural substrate. So I don't know if that's something that's actually been documented, but that's definitely my experience of them. They were said to have been introduced during the Second World War, attached to the hulls of ships and to warships. And According to our rarity points system, it's worth 14 out of a maximum of 100 points. But during the National BioBlitz, so starting from Saturday, it will be worth 28. So you get double points for non-native species. Okay, second species, and the second most recorded species, and that is the slipper limpet. So this one, its Latin name is Crepidula fornicata, and it says 5 centimeters long. But I feel like they can get a bit bigger than 5 centimeters. Is quite 5 centimeters, quite big-ish. I think they can get a little bit bigger than 5 centimeters, to be honest. But they're not massive. Unlike I think all the limpets that we have here natively, they have this sort of internal flat bit inside their shell. So our limpets have just got an open bit on the side of their shell where their foot completely covers. The slipper limpets have this flat bit of inner shell, which protects their vital organs. So their foot, which sticks to things, the rock or whatever, is just it sticks through that bit, and they don't have any foot where the in a bit of showers. Ellen, we've got a few comments. Stop me if anyone's got any questions, so we can take questions at the end.
There's a couple in there now, Ben, so up to you if you
Yeah, we
want
could take
to.
them. Yeah, if that's fine.
So Phoenix has asked, should we record dead individuals and empty shells or just live individuals?
You can
Great question.
record dead individuals and empty shells. What you should do once you've recorded it, I think you'll have to go to your account on iNaturalist afterwards, but you can actually tick it to say that it's dead, and that's quite helpful further down the line. But it will still count to your points as well, so you can record dead individuals and empty shells.
Perfect. And Jazzy in the Wild has asked, would you want multiple records of the same species in one area or just one record per species per area?
Um, so that's a good question. If you've got multiple individuals, then by all means collect multiple records. As far as the point system is concerned, you'll only get the points once for that species. So really, I would focus on if you're in one area, recording as many species as possible. You don't have to just record non-native species. It's just you'll get double points for them. So do have fun and discover everything that you can.
That's all the questions that are there for now. Feel free to add
No
more
problem.
questions, everyone, and we'll pick them up at the end, if not at another pause.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. So back to slipper limpet. So they're very distinctive species, I have to say. They're a fairly easy one. The outer surface is pale, and they have these sort of stripes which are formed when they grow. So they call them growing lines. So they're sort of white and brown in patches. 11 points for this one. You can see from the map it's found all over the south and east, and also quite common in southern Wales. Yeah, lots of all our rarity points are based on how many records already exist for that species. Next one. So this is one that we are very familiar with down here in the southwest. It's Japanese wireweed. And you can see from the map here, it is very common on the western coast, all the way up to Scotland now, and stretching all the great way across the south coast into the east coast. This has grown it's a spread across the country very recently compared to some of the others. It's a native species of the northwestern Pacific shores of Japan, and Russia and China. And it's spread over to here, well, not directly. So this is quite a common thing. So it may have spread across the Pacific to Canada first, and then onto mainland Europe, and then from there it may have just naturally dispersed from mainland Europe, or it may have been spread by boats as it was from elsewhere in the world. The scientific name is Sargassum muticum. It is a large olive brown seaweed. It's actually a rack, to be technical. And it can be pretty big. So often it can be over a meter long. If you go snorkeling, you'll often see a lot of it when the tide's in, or if you find it subtidally, it will actually be extending up into the water column. It could be its leaves have lots of little tiny teeth on them, so you can identify them from its leaves. But they also have these tiny spherical gas bladders throughout the seaweed, and that's quite diagnostic. Um, and typically, you'll be pretty clear when you find them. Down here in Cornwall, already, I mean, they sort of die off a bit in the winter. They used to die off almost completely in the winter, but not anymore. By the time spring is finished and summer has started, they can quite often fill up rock pools completely, and they become very, very familiar. There are species which can be confused with them in the genus Cysticeria. These species are a little bit different, and they're much rarer. You can sometimes they will still have air bladders, but they're actually in what we call the stipe, like the actual central bit of the seaweed. So that yeah, they are quite an easy species to actually identify in the field, just because usually, yeah, if they're there, they're absolutely everywhere. 10 rarity points for that one, doubled up to 20. Now, next one is the Bon Mason's hookweed, which is an interesting one, as I mentioned, because it established itself down here in the south of England. But it's not one that we typically see a great deal of now. Its Latin name is Bon Masonia hemifera, and it has, as a lot of red seaweeds do, two life stages, and it's this gametophyte or sexual life stage form that is the one that you're most likely to spot, and the other stage, we'll have a look at it on the next slide, is much harder to identify, but we'll have a quick look at it in a minute. When for the sexual stage, the dead giveaway are these like these hooks. That's how it gets its name. Crozier shaped hooks, they call them, because they're so curly. They can be seen with the naked eye, but if you've got a camera with a good macro lens, that's probably even better. With these seaweeds, you it's good to get them out of the water, put them into a pot, and space them out a bit, and then you'll be able to have a look for identification features such as these. And I believe it's similar to Bon Mason's fernweed. This is not a species I've ever even seen. Much rarer, and this Bon Mason's fernweed, it looks similar, but it doesn't have these hooks. Okay, so if you find the hooks and they're there, you're absolutely certain it'll be Bon Mason's hookweed. Now, this is an interesting one. So this, especially if you're up in Scotland, I don't know if anyone's joining us from Scotland today, but if you're able to record this one, it's actually normally worth 50 points. It's worth 100 points, which will go a long way to sending you flying up the rankings, which is a reflection of the fact that it's actually not been recorded a lot on iNaturalist. So all these rarity points are based on the number of records, but at the moment we don't use NBN data for that. We just use iNaturalist data, and iNaturalist has only really been going in the UK for the last 10 years or so. So it's not been there aren't that many records for Bon Mason's hookweed on there. There are slightly more now than the one we did it last year, because we've recorded a few, but not many. So that's a real one to look out for if you're after a t-shirt. Having said that, if you want to try and record the asexual form, here's a picture that I got from iNaturalist of it. Good luck is what I say. So this is what they look like, little bits of red fluff. And I can tell you that there are probably about 50 seaweed species in the UK that look like these little bits of red fluff. And I personally can't help you when it comes to how you tell the difference between this species and those. So you're welcome to give it a go. Um, Now is probably a good time for me to mention that for all of these records and the points, they will only be confirmed when they reach research grade on iNaturalist, and that will happen when somebody in the iNaturalist community, so it could be us, could be other participants, it could be other people involved, will check it out and confirm it. So yeah, so don't be putting anything, not that any of you would, anything in there that you think might score you some points, just if you're not really sure that's what it is. You don't have to be certain of what it is, but yeah, I guess don't be dishonest about it, I suppose, is what I'm saying. I will sort of expand on that a little bit. It's very good to put an identification on. All the iNaturalist, if you use an iNaturalist app, it has AI that can help you out. And if you're not sure, make sure you put something on there, and we will be having a look at it, and other people are having a look at it, and we can help you out with identifying it. Okie dokie. Next one, another big player down here in the south, which is spread elsewhere in the country, the Pacific oyster. So this one is a bit of a tale of woe when it comes to UK non-native species because it was actually deliberately introduced into the UK for agriculture purposes. And apparently it was initially presumed that the temperatures in this country would be too cold for Pacific oysters to successfully spread and settle and spawn. But that was a load of rubbish, basically, because they're absolutely everywhere now. The first record was found in 1965, and we have them all over the place at the moment. Cornwall Wildlife Trust down here have a program to deal with them by hitting them with hammers. And I don't know if that's had any real effect on the population size. We see a lot of it. The Latin name for them is Magellana gigas. They are up to 18 centimeters long. That seems pretty long to me. That's about maybe, yeah, but they can get pretty big, I suppose. They have quite a thick and rough shell. You definitely don't want to be walking around without anything on your feet in rock pools generally, but this is one of the things that could get you. So they do have quite sharp edges and a very wavy shell. And coloration wise, this picture doesn't really show it too much, but they can have yeah, these sort of dark purple markings, brown markings on them, particularly when they're young. And well, I wouldn't necessarily say they are that similar to the native oyster. Native oysters are quite different. You don't tend to find native oysters in the intertidal zone between low tide and high tide, but you do find Pacific oysters very much so in that area. So the likelihood is that if you see an oyster when you're rock pooling, that it will be, if it's alive, that it will be a Pacific oyster, not a native one. The other differences with the native oysters tend to be a bit flatter. They tend to be a lot more sort of circular rather than elongated. And the colours are a little bit more sort of creamy brown as well. So I don't think it's that easy to get them confused. Typically, what you'll find will be a Pacific oyster, unfortunately. Have you got any more questions, Ellen? I see something else has popped up.
Just people who are with us tonight who are in Scotland. So that was
There
great.
are some people from Scotland coming in.
Mhm.
Well, you're very welcome, as is everyone, of course. But yeah, good luck finding some that Bon Mason's hookweed. 11 points for a Pacific oyster, so they're quite common, but obviously doubled up. Now, this is a species that is, I think it must be like fifth or sixth in terms of the non-native species records in the UK. But I've never, well, maybe I have seen it, but I don't. I'm not too sure. I certainly don't see it a lot when we're rock pooling. It's much more commonly found in harbours and marinas, but also subtidally on wrecks and naturally also on rock at the bottom of the sea. Um, it's a sea squirt. It's stalked sea squirt. The scientific name for it is Stiliella clava. Pretty big sea squirts, up to 20 centimeters tall. Um, and you can see from the picture that it's orangey brown on the outside, but it has dark brown stripes on the inside. And it's very, very tough and leathery. I don't know if you're familiar with sea squirts. They're quite interesting they're animals. They are animals. They actually the closest relative to vertebrates, even though they look like they're not as highly evolved as vertebrates are. They are very highly evolved animals, and they've evolved to filter the water. And that's what these guys do as well. They have two siphons you can see at the top where they suck in and blow out water. And that's how they feed. It's worth 31 rarity points, so worth a trip to the marina to see if you can find them here. There are lots of other sea squirts. There aren't many that really look like this one. The biggest thing that distinguishes them from all other sea squirts is this stalk thing. So they are attached to the rock by a thin stalk, and then they sort of stick out into the water from there. If you see a sea squirt like that, that's what it is. Now we've got another seaweed here, and this is quite a long established non-native species called an oyster thief. And as you can see, it's found pretty much all around the country. Colpominia peregrina is the scientific name for this one. That 3 to 9 centimeters is something of an underestimate, I would say. I've seen some that are plenty bigger than that, almost the size of a football. They can actually be almost blown up like a football. They have air trapped inside them. The next bullet point. And they have this very sort of thin, sort of papery wall to them. Quite an unusual looking seaweed. Often taking new people out rock pooling, they ask me, what the heck they are, not realizing they're seaweeds at all. That's what they are. They are a type of seaweed. And that papery tissue does tear just like paper does. And they're very similar to this species, which the Latin name for this species is Limphesia marina. And I've got it here as sea cauliflower, which is very confusing because I think actually there is another species in this MBA guide called sea cauliflower, which isn't that basically. But that's the name for Limphesia marina on iNaturalist. So I'm sticking with this approach. And you do find them in the same place. The big difference is that whereas the oyster thief is sort of hollow and papery, these guys are more sort of gelatinous and sort of squidgy when if you feel them. And they don't tend to blow up quite so spherically as the oyster thief do. Harpoon weed is next. Okay, so this is a species which is very common down here in the southwest, but has spread elsewhere. It's closely related to Bon Mason's hookweed that we saw before. It's in a different genus though, so it's Asparagopsis armata is the scientific name. Get pretty big, up to 30 centimeters long. And the key distinguishing feature are harpoon-like branches. You remember for Bon Mason's hookweed, we had those crozier hook shapes on the seaweeds to identify them. These have got similar structures, but instead of being curled and hook-shaped, they're very straight and harpoon-like with barbs. And they actually use those barbs to attach to other seaweeds and other things in the sea that help them to disperse from place to place. And the feathers are shaped a little bit like little tiny pink Christmas trees. And yeah, it is quite similar to Bon Mason's hookweed, but if you have a look at those those harpoon-like branches, they're unmistakable. 23 rarity points for this one. That's a pretty good score for something that in some places is quite easy to find. And there you go. That's a good picture of the harpoon-like structures that you'll find on there. So if you have a good close look at them, then they're pretty easy to identify. Next one is another sea squirt. So this one is called the orange-tipped sea squirt on iNaturalist anyway. It's Corella umayota is the Latin name. Quite a common species. It's found all around the country, not so much in sort of north western Scotland, but most other places. Um, Slightly translucent, slightly see-through. It has one siphon at the three ends of it, so you can see this one's got a very clear siphon there. And it has, you can see its guts in this picture here. Let me show you that there. And that forms an anti-clockwise spiral. And if there is similar to another species, native species, it could be the European Ascidian, which is sometimes called the dirty sea squirt. But that's more of a sort of a lumpy sort of texture that you'll find on the outside, whereas the orange sea squirt is very, very smooth and more sort of see-through than the European Ascidian. 26 rarity points for this sea squirt, if you can find it. So we're nearly there with our top non-native species now. So this one, I'm not 100% sure why this one made the grade, because it is quite a rare species. I know that Chris at the MBA thinks that it's actually been over-recorded because it is very similar to one of our native species. So if you do think you found it, be careful. Take lots of pictures of it for your iNaturalist records to help us be able to, to confirm that you're right. The Latin name for it is Urosalpinx cyanera. Not a massive species at all, up to 4 centimeters long. And you can see the shell has these vertical ribs and then fine spirals going horizontally across the shell. You won't find it so much in the winter periods because it actually hibernates in the mud at that time, but that'd be fine at this time of year. And this is the species which you're most likely to confuse it with, which is the European stingwinkle. So you will find lots of them. And it's actually very unlikely that you'll find the eastern oyster drill. It's called eastern oyster drill on iNaturalist because I think they've just basically taken the American name from it. It's come from the America, and in this guide, it's called the American oyster drill. And it's come from the eastern coast of America. The biggest difference between this and the native species is that the native species is much rougher, really, in terms of this has got a much sort of nicely neater shell than the native species. 88 rarity points if you find this one, so doubling that up if you do get it, it will do you some good. This is a screenshot from the MBA guide for this species because it is a tricky one. So what we have here is showing that this species they both have a canal at the bottom of their shell, which is like an opening that goes down to the bottom. For this non-native species, it tends to be open, whereas for the native species, it tends to close up. Isn't really the greatest help, I would say, for that, because they only really close up for the older individuals. If you get a younger individual of the native species, it might actually be open. So you really need to focus more on the sort of roughness, general roughness of the shell to see if you've got a non-native species there. So that's it in terms of the top non-native species in this country. But I should imagine there's a few of you out there that's like crabs, and so I thought I'd just stick in a bonus crab section because we do have some non-native crab species in this country. And you may find them, you never know. There are three in particular. So the one that you're most likely to find, only really if you go to the east of the country, is the brush-clawed shore crab. Okay, so that's Hemigrapsis takanoi. Very common in the UK. So there's two Hemigrapsis species that we're going to be talking about here. And so they're not very common in the UK, very common in Europe. Both of the species are problematic invasive species in Europe, and we've been on the lookout for them in the UK for a long time. This one has established itself in the east of the country. They describe it as a compact crab, as you can see what they mean from that picture. That sort of squarish body. It's like a few of the crabs. You can find it in estuaries as well as in marine environments, and they say it's similar, if anything, to the native green shore crab that we have, which you may be familiar if you've ever been crabbing. That's probably our most common species in the UK. I wouldn't say it was necessarily that similar. It has these the brush claw bits. It has these furry bits on their claws. They're a dead giveaway, and that just the general square shape of its main body is also quite a giveaway. 34 rarity points if you can find this one. The next one, you might think we've got the same thing. You might go backwards there, but no, it's a similar species, but it is different. This one's the Asian shore crab, and this is Hemigrapsis sanguineus. So this is the one that the likes of John and Chris at the NBA are very interested in. If you do find one, there are some records on MBN, but there are no records on iNaturalist yet for this species. We've been on the lookout for it for a long time. If you find either of the species and you record it, then do try to get a good photograph of the eyes and the so-called teeth, which are the protruding parts around the eyes. I'll have a look at that in a second. Again, if anything, any native species you're going to confuse it with green shore crab. And this is what they mean by the eyes. So if you can get a picture of this, similar to this of your individual, then you might not be able to tell the difference. I would struggle to tell the difference, but John and Chris at the NBA would be able to tell the difference. They'll be looking for this ridge which is underneath the eyes, which is unbroken for the rarer sanguineous species and three parts for takanoi. And there are some other differences that you might be able to spot in the guide there as well. And the final species that we'll focus on is the Chinese mitten crab. So this has been found all around the country. It's a very, very estuarine freshwater species, really. And so you don't find it as much at the beaches, but it's not impossible. So we've listed it here. You know, I'm so unfamiliar with it. I've never actually said its Latin name before, but I'll give it a go. Eriochair sinensis. Very long legs. You can see that from the picture there. It's freshwater, estuarine, and marine. And it has dense fur on its claws. 26 rarity points if you can find that one. And if you like crabs, well, we've got plenty more crab talk next week, and our very own Dr. Laura Coles, who did her PhD on the shore crabs that we have for the native to this country that have spread all around the world, and looking at their ecology and how their ecology has changed as they've invaded other parts of the world. And she'll be giving a talk about that this time next week. And then this is last slide. So just a reminder, if I haven't already encouraged you enough to get involved with the National BioBlitz, please do get in touch, post on social media, tell us where you're going, and have fun, because really that's what it's all about, discovering marine wildlife and enjoying it with yourselves and others. So thanks very much for your time. If anybody's got any questions, then I'll be happy to take them. Stop recording there. Any questions on the